For everyone's information, we are recording so that those unable to attend live today will be able to view this at a later time. We'll also have a Q&A session at the end of today's presentation, and you can always either raise your hand and I'll be happy to allow you to talk, or you can use the chat function to ask us questions. If you have any questions at all or having any issues, you can email aelmore@forwardpinellas.org and I'll be happy to assist.
All right, well, thank you, Amy, for that introduction, and thank you all for joining us today. My name is Chelsea Favero. I am a planning manager here at Forward Pinellas, and I appreciate you all taking the time to join us on our Call for Projects webinar. So I really just kind of want to start with what the role of Forward Pinellas is, and that's really to align our transportation funding with projects that support our land use goals and Advantage Pinellas, which is our 2045 plan. So with all of our grant programs, you will see when the materials go out, there's a very strong linkage between transportation and land use. It is not just transportation focused. We want to make sure that all the projects that we are investing in using our state and federal dollars are really helping us get to where we want to be from a land use perspective and helping to get us towards, that transformational redevelopment goals that we have as an agency. So each year, Forward Pinellas develops a list of priority projects for state and federal funding, and then we work with FDOT to advance those projects. And the purposes of this call is to speak to our local government partners and to ask you to send us your best projects that align with each of our 3 grant programs. And then we competitively review and score those projects. And then the ones that receive either the highest scoring from a points perspective or that best meet the intent of the grant programs, those are the ones that we then advance for funding through our priority list. So this is just a very high overview. We are going to dive into each one of these grant programs individually. But I will say for each of our grant programs, there is no formal application structure. We're not going to hand you a fillable PDF and ask you to, fill in each of these boxes. But we do recommend that you follow the application criteria. Especially for our Complete Streets projects, we do not have a very strict point-based scoring, but we do review each of those applications against the criteria to make sure that the projects that we select best meet the intent of the program. So when you put your application together, you don't have to hire a consultant. It doesn't have to have the best graphics. That's not what we're looking for when we review these. We look for, what is the criteria? Give a description of how your project meets the criteria. That makes it easier on you, and it also makes it a lot easier on us as we review the projects to be able to see, okay, this was the criteria, this is how many points were available, this is how your project meets that. It just simplifies it for everyone. If you have any questions throughout the process, we do ask that you reach out to us directly. We do have a deadline of August 20th. If you do intend to submit for any of the grant programs, we ask that you let us know by that date. It's not really a hard and fast deadline. We just like a heads up so that we know what you're looking to submit for, and then we can provide you with additional assistance if you need it as you go through. And then for each of the individual projects or the grant programs, we do have technical support deadlines. There are a couple of things such as our Transportation Alternatives Program. There's a line in there, or there's a criteria for the level of traffic stress for bicycle projects. That data has to come from us, and we ask that you contact us by that deadline so that we have time to turn that data around to get to you. If you reach out to us after that date, obviously we're going to help you out however we can. But if you need crash data, level of traffic stress data, please just don't wait until the last minute so that we have enough time on our end to get that in. And now I'm going to turn it over to Angela Ryan. She's a principal planner with Forward Pinellas, who manages our Complete Streets program, and she is going to talk about that program and the criteria with that. Angela?
Thank you, Chelsea. Good afternoon, everyone. Like Chelsea just indicated, I'll be discussing the Complete Streets grant program, and I will provide an overview of the grant program itself, as well as some project examples, and take a deep dive into some of the application requirements. Slide. First, we are very proud to announce that this is our 6th year implementing the Complete Streets program here at Forward Pinellas. And the program is comprised of 2 different grant awards. First is a $100,000 concept planning award, and second is a $1 million construction project award. And something that I really want to stress here about the Complete Streets program that Chelsea mentioned is that the intent is not just transportation. It is indeed to benefit the land use within the corridor of the project. This should be projects that provide some sort of transformative element that provide for safety and enhancing all modes of transportation, provide quality places, and so on and so forth. I'll get into some of those details in just a few moments. Next slide. And essentially, what are Complete Streets? Well, if you're not familiar with them, like you can see on the slide here, it indicates that they are for everyone. They are streets that are designed for all modes of travel, no matter who you are or how you travel. There's emphasis of Complete Streets on walkable streets, bikeable streets, transit orientated, slower speeds, and then safe travel for vehicles. Slide. And there is indeed an FDOT policy that was adopted that went into effect 2014 that details FDOT's perspective and requirements under the Complete Streets program. And something just to pull out in regards to that policy, so you don't have to go through the entire document yourself, but the goal of the program, as you can see here on the slide, is to ensure that the entire right-of-way of a corridor is planned, designed, and constructed and operated for, again, safe access for all users. And the whole intent of the program is to ensure that the transportation network provides for all users every time there's a new project. Complete Streets are certainly just one piece of a much larger puzzle to ensure that communities have connectivity and safe corridors for travel. Next slide. And like Chelsea had indicated, and I just will reiterate, the Complete Streets program is indeed a competitive program of which you have set deadlines on your application materials for help from us in regards to some technical support, as well as the deadline for the application. We do have annual solicitation of the grant program, and we do provide technical assistance, and that includes one-on-one meetings, and certainly my contact information to include my email and my phone number will be provided. And I stress for anyone that would like some assistance with their application to please contact me. I'm more than happy to help you along the journey of completing your application. Next slide, excuse me. And this is some specifics about the Complete Streets grant funding. And all of this information is found online on our website, as well as detailed in the application materials that are also available on our website. But first and foremost, like I indicated, we do have a $100,000 concept award and then a $1 million construction award that will be provided. The concept planning project would be available in fiscal year 2022, and the construction project would be included in the 2023 to 2024 to 27-28 FDOT transportation work program. The concept planning requires a formalized agreement with Ford Pinellas, which would have to be conducted by July 1st, 2022. And there is one important aspect of the concept planning, which is that Ford Pinellas consultants must be used as part of your concept planning process. Again, we're happy to provide technical assistance as you go through your application materials. And please do contact us prior to or on the day of October 11th, 2021, if you have any questions about submitting your applications, and ensure your application is submitted by October 29th, 2021. Slide. And some minimum requirements for concept planning. And again, all of this information is detailed in the application, but we just really want to highlight some really important aspects of the concept planning projects for you to keep in mind while you're framing what project area within your community you think would be suitable for this particular grant. First, local support. It's really important that you have public involvement and as well as your political and government support for the project. As I've indicated before, and I certainly want to restate, it's really important when you put your application together to demonstrate that this is going to provide some sort of transformative land use benefit to the community. Again, the land use connection element cannot be stressed enough. Something that I've definitely seen in a lot of our applications that you'll see online is the opportunity for mixed land use areas and areas that need some connectivity and some improvement because of safety concerns. So a few things to keep in mind there in regards to really trying to look at projects where there needs to be an increased effort for safety for all modes, as well as areas that might have walkable commercial developments, bikeable access to jobs, et cetera, et cetera. And some specific information to provide is your existing conditions of the corridor, that baseline data. We have to understand the neighborhood in context with this particular project. For example, is this an environmental justice area that you're considering? Or is it in a community redevelopment area? That's really important information for us to consider how transformative this project will be if you are provided with the grant. Again, local and match is available, but it's not required. We do have to have local plan requirements, and as part of your application, it is important that you provide your plan and your timeline for the ultimate implementation so we can really understand the project itself as well as the ultimate impact of that project within the community as well as the transportation network. Slide. In construction projects, the minimum criteria here again is local support, and it too needs to demonstrate that it is a catalyst for land use development within the project corridor. It's really essential again here that you serve multiple modes. Construction projects, for example, that we've seen in the past have included bike lanes as well as widened and safe sidewalks and improved pedestrian crossing areas. Those are great projects that demonstrate multimodal opportunities for access for all people. Other projects, for example, have had transit hubs that they have placed within the project corridor. A few technical requirements here is that the project does have to have LAP certification or agreement. Your right-of-way does need to be available or secured as part of your application. Please make sure that's stated. And there needs to be a completed FDOT transportation block grant and transportation alternatives set aside funding application. We do have a link to that application embedded within our Complete Streets application. If you, for whatever reason, cannot find that particular application, contact me and I'll be happy to send it to you myself. Slide. Additional information in regards to the construction projects, that baseline data, of course, the existing conditions. Please tell us if this is a corridor that's used heavily by transit and the community structure, the land use, etc. The local match is not required, but is certainly available. Something that's really quite important that I touched on before, but I really wanted to emphasize here is the equity consideration with the Complete Streets. When we're thinking about the areas within Pinellas County that we know that need some sort of benefit for transformative land use as well as for safety, those happen to align within our environmental justice areas. So definitely do take a look at your community and consider what are those areas where we know that we have individuals living within the community that might not have safe access for job opportunities or educational opportunities, and how a construction project with a Complete Streets grant can provide for them some additional opportunities. There is, of course, the local planning requirements in the project schedule. There's other details that are in the application. And my suggestion to you when you go through your application is use our checklist and then make sure that you have indeed satisfied each of the requirements. You do not need to provide a dissertation, but just ensure that you have provided the information that we require to get a really strong understanding of your particular application and all of its many benefits. Next slide, please. And some application suggestions. This is a lot of words in the slide, so I'm just going to go ahead and explain. Concise applications, again, are more desirable. We're going to have a subcommittee of people that are going to be reviewing these applications. This subcommittee doesn't necessarily need to have 200 pages that describes every single detail about your project, but just going through, ensuring that you have addressed all of the requirements, and then telling your story about what is really unique about your project and how it's going to provide this incredible benefit to the community. That's really going to be the strongest application material. Certainly utilize application criteria to design your project. So start looking now at what is required in the application, and then consider what you want your project to look like. If you already have a project in mind, retrofitting it to include all the complete streets elements is a bit more difficult. But if you go ahead and look at the requirements of the complete streets and consider the concepts that I discussed earlier, such as putting safety first and investing in communities, multimodal access, all of those factors when you're designing the project, that's going to provide for a stronger application. Certainly, I don't have to say this again, but carefully review the application. Don't miss deadlines. It's very important. If your application is even 1 minute over the deadline, we cannot accept it because it's not fair to any of the other prospective applicants. Don't wait till the last minute to put together the application, of course, and that's really because we want to help you through the process and we're available. And if you wait till the last minute, you might not have time to meet with us. And I also highly stress everyone to take a look at previously approved grants under our Complete Streets program page on our website. That'll give you a really great idea of the type of projects that have been provided with grants in the past. Next slide, please. And here's some examples. The City of Tarpon Springs just won our Concept Planning Award for 2021. That was the call for projects for 2020. This particular project was to create a complete streets corridor along Diston Avenue. And Diston Avenue is actually a portion of Tarpon Springs that is disconnect. And not only are they going to connect the 0.2 mile gap, but the entire 1.9 mile corridor was part of the project. And the intent for the Diston Avenue project was to develop a complete streets plan study that would provide for important context-sensitive benefits to the community within this area of Tarpon Springs. And they really focused in their application on retaining the character and the culture of the neighborhood that this particular road resides within. And that's a really important element, of course, because this is a low speed, very calm neighborhood. So certainly putting a roadway that's going to increase travel speeds is not going to be desirable by the community. And getting that community support, political support, government support, that's important to ensure that you have a successful project. And again, this project here did indeed provide for a match, not required, but they did have a $68,000 match, which was definitely favorably received by the subcommittee, because that demonstrated the city's commitment to making this project successful. And that we're able to demonstrate these important connections to social, faith, health, commercial, education, as well as trail institutions within this portion of Tarpon Springs. Lots of details in this application. Please take a look if you'd like to have more information. Next slide. And the City of St. Petersburg was awarded our $1 million construction Complete Streets Award for funding for 2021. And this was a project that would go along 22nd Street South from 11th Avenue South to 18th Avenue South. It is within the Warehouse Arts District, Deuces Live area. And I'm sure that folks have probably seen. If not, please take a look on the St. Petersburg, City of St. Petersburg website, and you can look at that action plan for the redevelopment area within Deuces Live. This particular project was able to demonstrate that it was an extremely impressive catalyst for improving the commercial as well as residential area here by providing for access for people and safer roadway systems. This is a mixture of land uses. It actually serves as the literal front step for the St. Pete College Midtown campus. So this project was able to certainly demonstrate that it would provide educational access opportunities for people within this neighborhood. This corridor also has multiple neighborhoods serving businesses, the Royal Theater, multi-residential blocks, as well as an elementary school. This project is within a minority and environmental justice area, as well as within a community redevelopment area. this project was an excellent example of looking at an area within a city that really needed some additional corridor support that would provide for safety and enhance the connection for all modes, and of course connect those community centers. They did this through various aspects that are all detailed in the application, but it included elements such as a local trail and bike lane connections, widened and buffered sidewalks, enhanced and new pedestrian crossings and new bike lanes, as well as a new bus stop, actually several new bus stop locations. And of course, landscape amenities such as trees for shading and planting beds that would provide buffer between the roadway and the sidewalk. Slide, please. And again, I just would like to reiterate the program milestones. The call for projects is actually going on right now, June 2021. Technical assistance deadline is October 11th, 2021. The applications are due at 5 p.m. no later October 29th, 2021. In February, we will take the subcommittee recommendations to our committees, and we will ask for them to review and approve the subcommittee recommendations. The board approval of those recommendations will occur on March 9th, 2022. And a couple of really important dates here. The concept planning agreement must be executed by July 1st, 2022. That $100,000 is available then on July 1st, and all phases of the concept planning project would need to be complete by July 1st, 2023. And then the construction funding would tentatively be available in 2027. Slide. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Angela. And one thing I did want to stress on what Angela just spoke about, the timing for the complete streets, is that all invoices and work must be complete by July 1, 2023. The funding that we're utilizing for this is grant funded. And if that funding is not spent by that date, it goes away. So that is a hard and fast deadline. So whatever project you choose to undertake and submit for, we just want to make sure the funding that you're using from Ford Pinellas, you are able to expend that full $100,000 in that 1 year period. So now Rob Feigl, he's a program planner with us here at Ford Pinellas. He is going to talk about the Transportation Alternatives Program. Go ahead, Rob.
Hi, thanks, Chelsea, and thanks, Angela. I think you had some really good points that are also applicable to transportation alternatives that I don't have in my PowerPoint, but I would just piggyback on that with regard to Angela's slide on application suggestions, such as getting the applications in early and that sort of thing. I think that's really good advice that is also good for the really applicable for the TA program. Next slide. So talking a little bit about eligibility determination, it's a really important factor for FDOT. Projects really should clearly fit into the eligible categories that are defined in FDOT's transportation alternatives guidelines. From a policy perspective, the MPO does have its own emphasis on the TA program. It's traditionally been for bicycle pedestrian projects such as trails, sidewalks, and bike lanes. And TA eligible projects include construction, planning, and design. The MPO's emphasis is, as Chelsea mentioned earlier in the webinar, the emphasis is really reflected in the scoring to be consistent with the long-range transportation plan, or Advantage Pinellas. Next slide. So overall, the program structure, we have a minimum award amount of $300,000 and a maximum of $2 million. So if you have a project such as a pedestrian overpass that's $6 million, the TA program is probably not the right application for you. You might want to consider the multimodal list. And with regard to a minimum application amount, we've had some applications in the past that were such a small amount that it was really something that could be done at a more local level, like local government could do. And that's there to sort of make sure that the project application is justified in terms of the cost and time and dollars in vetting these projects. We've limited to 2 TA applications per project sponsor or per jurisdiction. And overall, our goal is to sort of have a shorter list as opposed to a long list, and have them funded as quickly as possible by FDOT. So with that in mind, after 3 years, if a project hasn't been funded into the work program, then that project is going to come off the list and can probably reapply later. So ideally, we're really looking for projects that applications with projects that are really sort of shovel ready, sort of ready to hit the road running. When I say shovel ready, I don't mean it has to be a construction stage, because as I mentioned earlier, it's acceptable to have TA funding for planning or design stages, but having the project ready to go in terms of having a complete project. So the prerequisites all come into play there, and the addendum and checklist that we'll include with the TA application all come into play there, such as local commitment, the documentation of right-of-way or easement has always really been really important, and can be a sticking point in preventing funding if that documentation isn't provided. Even if it's out there, it has to be in the application, or FDOT really can't move forward funding that. Next slide, please. So we'll talk a little bit about the scoring. So consistent with Advantage Pinellas, the long-range transportation plan, the scoring that we use in transportation alternatives programs are really geared to further the goals, objectives, and policies that we have in our long-range plan, such as direct access to multimodal corridor. We have a total of 60 points for an application. So you get 10 points for demonstrating multimodal access, 10 points for demonstrating that it has direct access to an activity center. And we really do mean direct access, emphasis on that word, because as we go through the projects, if it's sort of near, or it's just a few blocks away, we're kind of strict on that. It really does have to provide the actual access in order to get the full points for that. And then also projects in the what was formerly called the Bike Ped Master Plan, now called the Active Transportation Plan. You get 5 points for showing that a project, such as say a trail or a bike lane, is that typically would be identified in that document. And of course, we don't want to have a lot of gaps in our network. So if you can demonstrate that you're filling a gap in an existing network, you can get 10 points for that toward the application. And then direct access to priority transit routes, depending on the headway. So a 30-minute headway or better, you can get up to 10 points for that. And then if it's for 45 minutes to 60-minute headway, 5 points. And then everything that was mentioned with regard to environmental justice applies as well to the Transportation Alternatives Program. So direct access to an EJ area, which is environmental justice area, will add a full 15 points to your application. So I think one thing that's really important to note is that we can help. Part of the technical assistance that we can provide is helping provide maps that demonstrate what these areas are, that you can then take and do an overlay. So we can provide you a map showing where the environmental justice areas are, and sort of zoom in, where your project is. And that helps you to help us visualize, does your project check the list on this? So ideally you'd have a map for showing where the environmental justice area is, and how the project is providing access to that, or is it within that area. And then for the Bike Ped Master Plan, of course, we can provide the appropriate maps and files that you need to help with the application on that. All right, next slide, please. So as Chelsea mentioned earlier, we do need to get this in a timely manner. This is scoring that's done by Ford Pinellas staff. So you won't really be doing this on the application, but the bicycle facilities, this is in terms of after the project is completed. If there's sort of a range there, if the project is set up in such a way that it would be comfortable, say you're talking about a trail for all ages to utilize the trail, you can get up to 15 points. An example of that might be full-size trail that's buffered from traffic and really comfortable for people of all ages to use. And then on the trail, on the scale rather, we go all the way down to strong and fearless, which would be a bike lane on a frontage road, US Highway 19 with cars flying by and no buffer. You know, it's something that only the strong and fearless might want to tackle. So you wouldn't get as many points for that, or 0 points for that. So preferably, we're trying to get projects that are really enabling more people to use the trail other than just the strong and fearless types. So, and then with regard to sidewalk projects in a similar manner, we sort of have a little bit of a similar setup there with separated corridor, a minimum of two foot buffer. You get 15 points if you have, and this is again in terms of the completed project. If you have sidewalks on both sides of the roadway, you can get 10 points for the project. And then if it's sidewalk on only one side of the roadway, then only 5 projects. Next slide, please. So with regard to the TA application, it's really 3 important elements for the application. The number 1 on the slide there says, has a long name. It's really just the TA application, but we want you to know what the full proper name is, so you're not thrown off. I've had people get thrown off by what the actual name is of the application, because we're always calling it the TA application for short, but it does have a longer name that no one wants to go through saying more than once. So that's the full name of the actual application. And then in addition, so that has a lot of requirements in it. And I mentioned earlier FDOT's guidance. So I'll show you where that lives on the internet. It's really important. In fact, it's the responsibility of each project sponsor to read through that guidance. It has a lot of very important information, including should you even put the time and effort into applying? Because if you read through that and find that your project's not eligible, that's something you want to know up front and not later after we've gone really far down the road, putting a lot of time and effort into a project. So we've, in addition to the guidance and the actual TA application put together by FDOT, Ford Pinellas also has an application checklist to help you make sure that you're sort of checking all the boxes literally on some of the important areas that are often either left out of an application or later end up causing a project to not get funded in as timely a manner as it could have. So we're requiring that checklist to be included with the application, as well as an application addendum with additional information on what really needs to be included in the application. Next slide. So online, here's the link. You can also just go in and Google FDOT Transportation Alternatives Program. This is the link here as well. You go ahead and go to the next slide. I'm going to kind of zoom in. You can see toward the bottom of that page is a section called Resources. Next slide. And zooming into that, you can see that, or go back one. You can see, zooming into that there's something called TA Set Aside Statewide Funding Application, April 2021. So that's the TA application. And then the next one below that is the guidance and procedures from May 2021. So that's the guidelines that you want to take a look at. If you have trouble finding that, I can send you the link. We've sent you guys our contact information. It's also on the PowerPoints. Next slide. And that's just the cover of it, what it looks like, so you know you're in the right area. Next slide. All right, so we can go to the next slide. We show we've covered the application. And I'm just going to touch on the checklists a little bit. You do want to make sure that the applications include sufficient detail for the engineering estimate. That's one of the things that we've added to our checklist. We do have some examples that we can provide for that. And in fact, examples of entire project applications, which I would highly recommend taking a look at. Just you can email myself or Chelsea, and we can provide a full TA application that you can look at as an example. But it's a really good idea to work with us. That's kind of what we mean by the technical assistance, is helping you to kind of put that information together, make sure that you have everything, so that when it's submitted to FDOT, they can determine that the project is in fact eligible to move forward for funding. Otherwise, they absolutely just cannot fund the project until they sort of checked all the boxes that they need checked off. Next slide. And then for the addendum, one of the common things, I think we had one or two last year that checked every box, and I think it kind of got rushed through, and they didn't maybe start it early enough, and so they didn't have an authorized signature. So going through these checklists and addendums is really helpful, and I think just reiterating what Angela said earlier is probably the biggest thing, is start early, and then that way you're not going to run into a scenario where you're unable to get a signature in time before a deadline. And when it comes to an authorized signature, that typically means something like a person who has the authority, budget authority to grant that authorization, such as a county administrator or a public works director. And another reminder in there that documentation of right of way, because that's another one that's always been a sort of a sticking point. So next slide. So I think we've covered the application checklist and addendum. Please be sure to include all three of those in there. And one thing that'll help us a lot is the maps that we mentioned earlier, to help us sort of quickly get in there and determine if projects are checking off certain areas like environmental justice access to get the points that you're wanting for the application. For the TA, we have this, this is the call for projects general schedule. And I've gone in and just highlighted in red the areas applicable for TA. So for technical assistance, the deadline's September 10, and then the application deadline, October 1st, and then November, the staff will be taking a look at the projects, reviewing and for ranking and such. So again, start early, and if you need any help, don't hesitate to contact me, and I'm more than happy to help you kind of pull together whatever you need to get the project going, get a full proper application. The biggest thing, biggest buzzword for FDOT is a complete application when it comes to TA, and all the things that we've covered are going to really help you a lot to achieve what they consider to be a complete TA project. And so that's the main thing, complete project, and is it eligible? Main two things that they look for in terms of whether or not they're going to move a project forward and put it in the work program and get funded. So doing all these requirements is boring at best, I know, but it's crucial when it comes to getting the projects to move forward and getting them funded and as soon as possible. So I think that's my last slide. Thank you.
All right, great. Thanks, Robert. So now I'm going to cover the multimodal priority call for projects portion of it. So this one we actually started last year for the first time. So this is only our second year of it. So this is one of our newer ones. So basically with our multimodal priority list, we have a lot of criteria and scoring that really aligns with these goals that you see up on your screen. These are the goals that are straight from our long-range transportation plan. And we want to make sure that any kind of scoring that we developed for this program closely aligns with the long-range plan. We want to make sure we're advancing those projects that really just help us advance the goals of Advantage Pinellas. So I will note the criteria that are included, and these will all be in the application packet. They're applied to all projects regardless of mode. They are mode neutral for the most part. If they're not, there will be a note on that criteria stating how it is not mode neutral. The program structure document includes a lot of detail on how the criteria will be applied. So if you look at just the scoring rubric and you have questions, go to the program structure document because we try to break it down as to, this criteria, how it would apply to an ITS project versus a transit project. All the details are in there. And then I will note that also that advancement of the projects is at the sole discretion of the Ford Pinellas board and will not necessarily include the projects receiving the highest number of points. We do plan to score these projects. The way we did it last year, we also did this for the TA, is we had a group of internal staff and we all scored the projects individually, and then we came together to compare our notes. And this way we really just wanted to ensure that we're applying the criteria evenly across all of the different projects in a consistent manner. So when we do the scoring for this, they will be in rank order. But we do tend to we group them in different what we call buckets or levels. There's a high category, a medium high, a medium low, and then we bring them to the board, and the board will decide which of the projects they would like to add to the priority list. And they could always pick a low, a medium, and a high if they want to have geographic distribution of the projects or modal distribution. That will be up to the board when they take action on the list. So this is the structure of the grant program. We do have a minimum project cost of $350,000. Much like Rob noted on the TA, it can be very timely or time consuming and very costly to process these applications. And we want to make sure that, if we get an application for a $30,000 crosswalk, this is not the right program for that. It'll take more for us to process the paperwork than it will to just build the crosswalk. So that's why we have a minimum project cost. There is no maximum project cost for the multimodal list. So, I mean, if you come to us with a $100 million project, we might struggle a little bit to get that funded with our available resources, but we also don't have that upper limit on it. And any phase of a project is acceptable for this program. We are asking that each applicant limit their applications to only 3, so no more than 3 per entity. And this includes all of our local governments, our transit providers, and our regional partners. And all modes are considered for this section of the priority list, with one exception. Standalone bicycle pedestrian projects are not eligible through the multimodal program. We developed the active transportation plan when we developed our long-range plan. And with the long-range plan, we agreed to advance our top 10 trail corridors and our top 4 multimodal overpasses, basically, trail overpasses. And we have committed to advancing those onto the priority order, into the priority list, I'm sorry, in that order. And we are advancing those separately. So because we do not want any overpasses or trails jumping the queue, basically, and getting ahead of those that we already committed to doing, we do not allow standalone bicycle pedestrian. So there is that caveat on there. But roadway widening projects, complete street projects, transit capital projects, technology projects, all of those are eligible. We welcome your applications. If you have any questions, just reach out to us. And again, each of those are going to be evaluated against the criteria that support the goals and advanced in ranges, as I just noted. This is kind of the high level for the scoring. Again, the details behind each one of these will be in the packet, but about 25% of the points goes to safety, 22% to equity and health, 18% of the points towards mobility, and then you see the rest. There are also some other considerations that we look at, including project readiness. If this project is just kind of this thought you have in your mind and it hasn't really been fully vetted, that's not really going to get the same level of consideration as one that has community support, where if we get it on the priority list and it gets funded, it'll get done. Countywide significance is another project or another consideration. We're not looking at just major regional corridors, but we want to see that the project has some kind of benefit to Pinellas County as a whole, and maybe not just a dead end street in a local neighborhood, for example. And then again, also that documentation of public and local support is very important for us. We want to make sure that we are advancing those projects that have the support of their communities. We've had it in the past where projects have been funded during the work program. They're 1 year away from being under construction, and then the local government has asked us to pull the funding off of the project. That is not the situation anyone wants. So we do try to avoid that at all costs. So this just talks about that review process that I touched on, that internal review and independent scoring. And then we will sit down with each of the applicants and have a one-on-one meeting with you to talk about how the scoring was applied, to answer any questions that you may have. We also do this for the TA program. Then we'll seek committee recommendations, and the Ford Pinellas board will take action on those in the spring. This is the timeline for the multimodal priority process. These applications are due December 17th. It is a little bit longer of an open window. We did receive feedback from you all and other partners that having all the applications due at one time was a bit onerous to manage. So we do have this staggered due date system. Very similar to the other ones. In February, we'll have the committee recommendations, the board taking action in March 2022. And then any projects that are agreed to be added to the list, those will go on about June of next year. They'll be added to the priority list and then eligible for funding consideration during the 23, 24 to 27, 28 FDOT work program. One thing I did not note on these slides, but was touched on for the other applications, that FDOT funding application is critical. If you do not have that application for any of these grant programs, we cannot accept your application. DOT will not review it. They won't look at it. They're going to skip over it. So it doesn't really behoove us to add a project to the priority list if that application is not available. So again, just some next steps. August 20th is that intent to submit deadline. If you have ideas and thoughts you just want to bounce off of any one of the three of us, please send them our way. We're happy to give you feedback and any kind of technical assistance that you may need. We've gotten questions in the past, do you think this would be a good project? And while we can't say, it's terrible, we can kind of guide you in a direction of, well, these are the types of projects we funded in the past, and give you a little bit of feedback on what you're thinking. So I guess at this point, we can open it up to any questions. We do have a representative from the Florida Department of Transportation, Jensen Hackett. He is on the line as well. I don't know if we can promote Jensen to be a panelist so that he can maybe talk a little bit about the importance of the TA application. But if anyone has questions, you can either put them in the chat pod, there's a Q&A feature, or you can raise your hand, and then we can turn on your microphones and we can answer any questions that you may have in real time.
Thank you, Jensen. You should be able to unmute yourself and show your video if you'd like to. If you raise your hand, anyone participating, if you raise your hand, I'll be happy to allow you to talk. And you can also add your questions to the Q&A section. So Chelsea, one of the questions we've gotten right now is, will Forward Pinellas provide the FDOT application for the multimodal priority projects?
Yes, I see that. And I will say that that application is the same one for all three grant programs. The FDOT application works for our complete streets, for the multimodal, for the TA, same application, same requirements. And we do include links to that application in each one of the application material packets that will be going out, I believe, on Friday. And then a question we did receive earlier that I just kind of answered in the chat pod was about construction funding for the complete streets. The question was how much design needs to be completed before they submit for an application. But the answer to that is, given that the funding would be available in the new 5th year of the work program, we do not expect that you would have any design completed on those projects. 5 years sitting there with a design fully vetted is a bit long. So what we would say is, once your project, or once you've received funding for that project, once it shows up in the work program, then you have a couple of years to get that design underway. But we would ask that, if you were to receive a Complete Streets construction grant, that you complete that design at least 1 full year before the construction funding is available. Just so that you have time to iron out any kinks that may come up during the design process before the construction funding is available. So, if you're going for construction funding, we want to have a fully vetted idea from you, maybe a concept, definitely community support, but you do not have to have any kind of % design plans completed at the time of the application. All right, I'm not seeing any more questions come in. Our contact information is up here on the screen. Again, this is being recorded and we're going to post this online. On Friday, we are going to email all of our technical coordinating committee members this information on the call for projects. and we'll have press and social media going out next week on it. Please reach out to us if you have questions, comments, concerns. Take a look at the materials, and we are going to be available, for the next 6 months or so to answer any questions that you may have. All right, still seeing nothing else. I guess I'll thank you all for participating today, and I hope to see some applications from all of our local governments. Thank you all very much.